Sorry. Okay. So I don't know if anybody heard that then. No, will I start again? Okay, sorry. Okay, so welcome to everybody in the audience, and it's nice, as I said, to have some people here face to face, and then the rest of everybody's at home. You're all very welcome as well. So tomorrow is International Women's Day, as most of you know, and the theme for this year is around breaking the bias. So my talk for this evening, I've really concentrated on nutrition around menopausal health, because as I think everybody who has been or coming up to the menopause, been through or coming up to the menopause knows it's one of the areas really that there's a lot of work needs to be done in this area, and it's an area really where there's a lot of room for breaking the bias, so to speak. So I just will move on now. I hope everybody can hear me. Oops. Sorry, let me. Okay, so really, I suppose here we can see the stages of a woman's life. I had a little pointer there a minute ago, and you can see the areas. I'm going to try and talk into the mic as much as I can, but you can see there the areas of childhood, puberty, maturity, menopause, and old age. So this area of menopause is the area that I'm going to concentrate on tonight, really looking a little bit at the lifestyle-related diseases that are associated with the menopause, the symptoms of menopause, and what can be done nutritionally and where the evidence is around these areas. This part of our lives as well is the area when we lay down the foundations for an older, our health as we get older, and the prevention of osteoporosis, the prevention of cognitive decline. So it's a really important area. And yet I had to laugh when I saw this, the 5 stages of a woman's life: to grow up, to fill out, to slim down. And really this part here, it just made me, well, laugh and cry, sort of, to hold it in, like from your mid-40s to your around early 60s. And then I can't wait for this bit, to hell with it, as I get older, and just let, let whatever happens happen. But I mean, this part here, we can really do a lot. I think a lot of people, especially now during COVID, who are in this age group, have carried the weight of responsibility and jobs, have carried the weight of responsibility with teenage children or older children at home, and it's been really quite difficult, and they really need a bit of time to look after for themselves. So even though nutrition is critical at each stage of the life cycle, this part gets less attention and really needs to have more attention. I just want to refer back to some of the other public health lectures that are there at the Institute of Food and Health website. I had done one a couple of years ago, really focusing on breast cancer and irritable bowel syndrome and some of the myths that are around there more generally related to women's health. There's also a nutrition and weight management lecture there that's useful, and one that is nutrition during and after pregnancy, as well as many others around food waste, food sustainability, infant feeding, childhood nutrition, etc. So really nice, useful lectures there. Now, I suppose just to look initially at what nutrition is not, when we're looking at nutrition for women's health, it is not intravenous nutrition therapy, all right? And there's been quite a lot about this recently. It is not detox diet. It is not low carbohydrate diets, and it's not coconut oil. Okay, so very clearly it is not those. There are other types of diets that are being promoted for women's health, dairy-free being one, gluten-free being another, vegan diets being another. Now, all 3 of those types of diets can be really healthy diets if you need them, if you want to follow them, but they do require quite a lot of extra planning and a lot of extra, I suppose, knowledge. So even when we look at dairy-free diets, dairy provides most of the calcium in our diets, but it also is a really good source of iodine and B vitamins. So if we go on a dairy-free diet, we have to make sure that we plan it very carefully so that these vitamins and minerals are met. In a gluten-free diet, I mean, again, if you've got celiac disease, a gluten-free diet is obviously the management, how you manage a celiac disease, but it is quite difficult and quite restrictive to manage. And even in terms of ordinary bread, a simple food that we eat, Irish bread, or the bread that we eat in Ireland, is actually one of the best sources of iron in our diet. So to actually cut bread out, unless you really have to, it can cause problems. And again, a vegan diet can be really healthy, but it requires a lot of work and a lot of planning. And, you've got concerns over quality of protein, B12, as well as some other micronutrients. So it's just, there's nothing wrong with any of these diets. They can be very healthy, but they do require a lot more effort and a lot more work. I just pulled this from our famous store that most of us have been in at some stage in our lives, even if it's only to browse. And this is actually what's up there now, advertised, these booster shot injections, IV drips, like so expensive, like a basic hydration. You can see what's in it. Sodium chloride, a bit of bicarbonate that we make from normal metabolism. Sodium chloride that we're being told, that you don't need really, that we all have too much of it. A bit of potassium that we can get from an orange or a cup of coffee. And the other one was, glutathione, which is like an antioxidant. I'm not even sure how stable it can be when it's administered intravenously. And that's €85. And going up to €100 if you get a bit of something else in it, a bit of a multivit. So this is being advertised locally. If you've got mad money to spend, but it's like, this is not what nutrition is for women's health. There's so much there, like detox diets. I can understand why people get really confused. I think all of us can, why people get really confused. And what I really like is this infographic that was produced by the British Dietetic Association, sponsored by the Wellcome Trust, which is an organisation in the UK that sponsors research. So the best kept secret is to have a good functioning, healthy liver and good functioning, healthy kidneys. Now, they can get diseased. Obviously, your liver and your kidney can get diseased from different conditions. But there's a lot we can do to help our liver stay healthy, and a lot we can do to help our kidneys stay healthy. So to go on to menopause, it generally starts around mid-30s and lasts until sort of early mid-50s, depending on how unfortunate, I suppose, is the word you choose, it lasts. So again, it starts with sort of irregular periods, but the symptoms of the menopause, I think if anybody has been through, there's two younger ones in the audience here, things to look forward to. But, the night sweats, the hot flushes or flashes as they're called, loss of a libido, the weight gain. And when you put in looking in images say for menopause into Google, it comes up with the most horrendous pictures of all of the symptoms that you can possibly experience as you go through the menopause. So the hot flushes that don't just last 6 weeks, but last for years and years and years. The sleep problems, you can't get hot, you're cold, you're hot, you're cold, you have the door open, the window open, then you have it on, closed again. Tiredness, the weight gain, memory issues, skin dryness and hair loss, and loss of bone. Now, some of these things you can't do much about, but some of them you can, all right? So again, issues around heart, breasts, teeth, hair, bladder, bones, skin, and uterus. So heart and bones, you can really do a lot about. Okay, some of the others, there's not as much evidence and there's probably less that you can do about. And I really laughed at this. Well, I didn't really laugh, but I just thought it's very true. The 7 stages of menopause: itchy, bitchy, sweaty, sleepy, bloated, forgetful, and pure psycho. And I think anybody who's been through menopause has probably hit all of those at some stage. So what can we do? All right. Well, as I said, the most important thing that we can do something about is around our heart health and our bone health. Okay. So in terms of heart health, checking blood pressure and cholesterol regularly is really important as we get older. Okay. It's known that one out of 2 Irish women die of heart disease. Okay. So 7 times more people Irish women die of heart disease than they do of breast cancer. And everyone knows about breast cancer and is really conscious about breast cancer. They go and get their mammograms, but not everybody goes and gets their cholesterol and blood pressure checked. 5,000 Irish women die of cardiovascular disease every year. So that's 1 every 2 hours. And most of that can be managed by lifestyle and changes in lifestyle and diet. Okay, so I suppose when we look at that, there's quite a lot comes into that. So we need to look at it carefully. So there was a report that was done in 2021 by the Lancet called the Lancet Women and Cardiovascular Disease Commission report. And they looked at all of the sex-specific factors that cause cardiovascular disease in women. They looked at other risk factors that are the established risk factors that pertain to both women and men. And then they looked at other under-recognized risk factors, that relate to heart disease. And then they also looked at what COVID put on top of that. So you can see there the biological risk factors, but you can also see the other COVID-related risk factors that came into play. So working at home, trying to manage children as you are teenagers as you worked, differently, like less medical care, not being able to go and get medical care as frequently as would be usual, not being able or having the time to self-care, working from home, as I said already, issues around mental health, and all of these came into play as well, because they increase stress, and we know that cardiovascular disease is also related to stress. So I suppose what we're really saying is that high blood pressure kills more women than men. Okay, and those are American figures, but they again show you, and I've given you the Irish figures there, they really show you that, heart disease is a big problem for women. And one of the reasons really is that, I suppose, once we reach the menopause, our estrogen starts to decline, and estrogen relaxes the blood vessels. So when we have less estrogen, the blood vessels are less relaxed, and that's one of the reasons why we get high blood pressure. Estrogen also helps to reduce low density or the bad cholesterol, so your LDL cholesterol, because in order to make estrogen, you actually use some of the LDL cholesterol. And then when you're not making as much estrogen, then you're not using up as much of the LDL cholesterol. So these physiological changes that occur actually have profound effects on our risks of cardiovascular disease. Okay, so to go back to what we can do about it, okay? I always like to think of things in a more positive way. So like rather than saying lose weight, okay, we try and maintain a healthy weight. Rather than saying don't eat this, don't eat that, we try and eat more of things that we know will help us, okay? So eating more fruit and vegetables per day, eating more dietary fiber. Obviously there has to be reducing fat and total and saturated fat, increasing physical activity, making sure that we have enough calcium, which is good for our bones, but also the low-fat dairy products are good for cardiovascular health. Making sure that we have adequate vitamin D. Okay, making sure that we have enough iron, because sometimes people forget that you need iron even when you're menopausal. They think you need a little bit less, and you do once you've passed the menopause. But a lot of people, when they are going through the menopause, can have really heavy periods and can actually lose quite a lot of iron. And then remembering that no matter how awful you feel and how bad you feel, that eating loads of sweet or snack foods does not really help. It may help just for a few minutes, but it doesn't really help in the long run. And I just found this, stressed, if you spell it backwards, actually spells desserts. Now that doesn't mean that you can't have dessert, but I suppose it's just that you're not comfort eating. So when we look at the relationship between weight gain and cardiovascular disease, you can see there as a BMI increases, your risk of cardiovascular disease increases, okay? And when we look at the data from Healthy Ireland, the Healthy Ireland surveys from 2021, so that's only last year, we can see that a lot of people who are women in the age group between 45 and 54 and 55 and 64. Like about 50% of these are trying to lose weight. Okay, so weight loss is something that a lot of people in our age group are trying to do. Okay, which is good, but it can be difficult. And how are they doing that? Well, again, when you look at the Healthy Ireland survey from 2021, most people are exercising more, which is really positive. Most people are trying to eat fewer calories, which is fine. Most people are trying to eat less sugar and eat less fat. More people are trying to eat less sugar than the number trying to eat less fat. Whereas really we know in terms of cardiovascular disease, it's really difficult to reduce fat and sugar. Okay, so really I suppose what we need to concentrate on is trying to reduce our total fat, and within that trying to reduce our saturated fat. Okay, and have better sources of fat. So fats that are poly or monounsaturated. And if we have something that has a little bit of sugar in it because it has less fat, so be, really. It's virtually impossible to cut down completely on both fat and sugar. Okay, and interestingly, in spite of people in our age group trying to lose weight, unhealthy snacks, daily consumption of unhealthy snacks is like really high. So over a third of women in our age group are taking like at least 2 unhealthy snacks per day, and many of them taking 1. So overall, more than 50% of people are taking at least 1 or 2 unhealthy snacks per day. So even though they're trying to lose weight, they're also eating unhealthy snacks. So a key tip would be to try and have healthy snacks around the place, because you all know that if you have bowls of sweets, if there's chocolates in the fridge, if there's crisps in the press, you will eat them. If there is fruit there or a few nuts, you'll eat them. Okay, and oftentimes when we shop and we think, oh, we have to buy something for the kids or in case people will come or whatever else. But in fact, sometimes we're codding ourselves and we're buying them because we're the ones who eat them, you know. So really, I suppose it's like children. If you have fruit available for children, they'll eat the fruit. If you have chocolate available for children, they'll eat the chocolate. And we're no different even when we get a bit older. So really, I suppose the tips would be, we know people are eating unhealthy snacks. So really, in as much as possible, if we could try and have plenty of healthy snacks around. So even things like vegetable sticks, hummus, you know, as I said, fruit, lots of different fruits, some nuts, even a bit of dried fruit. They're all much more healthy than buns, cakes, pastries, etc. Okay, the other thing that can really help, as I say, is to increase your fruit and veg. So when we're trying to do that, we can look and see at the 2021 survey as well and see how few people actually manage to eat 5 or more fruits or vegetables per day. So they don't have the data broken down by gender across the age groups, only overall, but only 39% of women overall eat 5 or more fruits and veg per day. And that was only last year, and that was in Ireland. Okay. So, you know, there is a huge amount that could be done here. And if people eat more fruit and more veg, it doesn't matter what fruit, what veg, they don't have to be fancy fruits or fancy veg, any fruit or veg, then that will help displace some of the fat, some of the salt, some of the other foods in the diet. So ideas will be like chopped dried fruit with breakfast, vegetables with lunch and dinner, fruit as a snack, and then incorporating plant proteins into the diet, which I'll come on to in a minute, but maybe a little bit helpful in reducing some of the symptoms associated with the menopause. Okay, and that slide, I think just summarizes it really nicely. If you take 10 portions of fruit and veg, which is a lot, but you know, you get about 24% reduced risk of heart disease, 33% reduced risk of stroke, 13% reduced risk of total cancer, and about a 31% reduction in dying prematurely. So it's really worthwhile trying to eat more fruit and veg, even if you can't manage the full 10. But certainly at least 5 per day is what we should be all aiming for. And we know from the data last year that we're not doing that. The other thing that is really helpful, and again, it comes with the fruit and veg, is to try and eat more dietary fiber. The recommendations are for about 25 to 30 grams of dietary fiber per day. And we know that Irish women eat about 17 grams. So again, if we are eating more whole grains, which would be helpful in terms of cardiovascular health, more fruit and vegetables, that would be useful. We also know that it will help to protect against bowel disease, or bowel cancer, I should say. So bowel cancer, about 1 in 19 Irish women are diagnosed with bowel cancer during their lifetime, as well as, being, helpful for them, constipation and other more simple bowel diseases or conditions. Being active. So activity is the best medicine ever, okay? It reduces the risk of type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, falls, depression and dementia, joint and back pain, and cancers. So at least 150 minutes of activity per day, okay? Or per week, I should say, per week. All right. Alcohol, I think the results from the 2021, I actually didn't put them in here, the 2021 survey show that there's probably been a reduction in binge drinking and a reduction in alcohol consumption. But it's important to remember as women that if we drink alcohol, we shouldn't have more than 14 units per week. And it's also important to remember that alcohol is really high in calories. So if we are drinking more than the 14 units, it is actually a source of calories that doesn't have many other micronutrients. And when we talk about units of alcohol, and this is one of the things that I suppose is problematic for people when they're at home, is that a standard glass of wine, for example, is quite tiny compared to what we would pour for ourselves when we're at home. So it's really being careful about the units of alcohol and what is in a unit of alcohol, really, and then binge drinking, again, just to be careful of that. So again, just looking at how alcohol compares to other foods. So if you see like a large glass of wine, it will be the same as a cornetto. It will be a pint of lager, it will be about the same as a donut. And most of us could easily put away 2 or 3 glasses of wine, and we wouldn't really, or 2 or 3 pints, and you probably wouldn't eat like 3 donuts or 3 cornettos, one after another, but you could easily put away, most of us, I think, several glasses of wine. So it's just to be a bit conscious of it as a source of calories. Okay, again, trying to, as I said before, trying not to comfort eat, or when we're stressed to try and do something else, like go for a walk, watch a movie, do something, but try not to get into the habit of comfort eating. Okay. So again, just to go on to that, so cardiovascular health, as I said, is really important, and we can do something about it. We can eat more veg, we can eat less fat, we can take more exercise, okay, we can eat more dairy products. Osteoporosis is the other condition that's associated with the menopause, okay? And you can see there how, as you become menopausal, how the density of your bone declines, all right? So bone becomes less dense, as we produce less estrogen. And you can see there, at sort of, 40, 50 and 60 years of age, how you even gets a slight change in posture because of the reduction in bone density. We know that 1 in 2 women and 1 in 5 men over the age of 50 in Ireland experience fractures, mostly as a result of low bone strength. So it's really a big problem for women. And we know that fractures associated with osteoporosis can cause pain, severe disability, often leading to reduced quality of life, often leading to death. And we know that if a woman breaks like neck of femur or a hip, their hip bone, it's associated with a 20 to 25% risk of death. Okay, but even some of the other bones are associated with risk of death, even if it's, a little bit less. It wouldn't be as much as 20 or 25%. So it's very important to remember that bone is living tissue and it is replaced. Okay, so it is replaced, like daily, weekly, all of the time. It does, our peak bone mass does occur in our late 20s. So bone mass in sort of adolescence is trying to achieve good bone mass and good dietary intake of calcium in adolescence is very important. And we know that it falls after the menopause. You can see there how much it falls by, okay? But we can still try and reduce that decline in its fall, okay, if we have a good dietary intake of calcium and vitamin D. So the decrease slows but continues. The higher the bone mass in young adulthood, the slower the decline. And it is determined by genetics, but diet and lifestyle can make differences as well. So like we can say we're going through the menopause and just forget everything, or else we can say, look, we know we're at risk of heart disease. We know we're at risk of osteoporosis. There are things we can do and we try and do them. Okay, so the most important thing to keep your bones strong, link in with cardiovascular disease prevention, link in with cancer prevention, taking regular exercise, not drinking alcohol in excess or not smoking. And again, trying to maintain a healthy weight, okay? Yo-yo dieting, so going up and down is not a healthy approach, okay? So trying to keep a sort of steady weight. Eating a diet rich in calcium and vitamin D. And again, we've heard a lot about vitamin D during COVID. Vitamin D is a really important vitamin. It's probably been overhyped during COVID. But it is a really important vitamin for bone health and possibly for immune function. So the hype shouldn't let us lose the fact that it is really important for bone health. All of us need vitamin D. The recommendations in Ireland are for anybody aged over 65 to take a 15 microgram of vitamin D every day, and for people younger than 65 to have approximately 10 micrograms. We can get it from sunshine, but in Ireland, particularly in the wintertime, the latitude of because of our latitude, the angle of the sun is too sort of low, and we actually make very little vitamin D. We also need protein, vitamin K, magnesium and zinc for healthy bone. Okay, so again, that I suppose links back to not avoiding any particular food group, or making sure that we have a mix of food groups in our diet, okay? So these nutrients are all available as long as you eat a wide range of foods. And if somebody doesn't like one particular food, that's fine. But if somebody cuts out a whole group of foods, then that can be problematic. Supplements, as I said earlier, are not generally required in Ireland, provided you've got a healthy diet, sort of a balanced diet, except for vitamin D. Okay, if you're vegan, you will need supplements of B12 as well. Okay. And when we're talking about calcium and meeting our calcium needs, the best form of calcium comes from dairy products. Milk, cheese, yogurts, okay? Cream and butter, even though they're dairy products, don't contain calcium. And if we're using an alternative, we may need to make sure that they're fortified with calcium. But even then, the calcium within dairy products is actually better absorbed by the body than that in the fortified dairy alternatives. If somebody is lactose intolerant, there are low lactose milks available. Okay, we don't need to drink gallons of milk, but we should be trying to take at least 3 portions from the dairy foods every day. So one portion is like one glass of milk. So you could have, say, half a glass on cereal and a little bit for your cups of tea and coffee. Maybe one piece of cheese, the cheese size of a matchbox, and one yogurt. It doesn't have to be pints of milk. It doesn't have to be tons of cheese. You know, small portions are fine and will give you sufficient, because people are often worried about, you know, food sustainability and food security and all of these other issues as well. But, you know, if we just keep to the small portions, then, you know, that will meet our nutritional requirements and also is sustainable, or leads to food sustainability, gives for food sustainability. As I mentioned already, sometimes people think they need less iron as they go through the menopause, and certainly postmenopausally, you do need less iron, but during the menopause itself, it's important to make sure that people have adequate iron, or any woman has adequate iron, because their periods can be very irregular and they can be very heavy at times. And again, it's found in red meat. You only need a small portion. And it's also found in peas, beans, nuts, pulses. So again, trying to balance a mixed diet is really useful. There is very little research on the menopause at all. There is some Irish research that has just been started by Dr. Trish Heavey down in Athlone. And as far as I'm aware, she's the only person who's doing, in the country, who's doing research on nutrition and the menopause. And even internationally, there isn't that much. There seems to be some from Spain, and, you know, but there's actually not given that the menopause affects so many women, it's surprising and really shocking that there's so little research there. Anyway, good old Trish has taken this up, and she got some funding, and she's looked at, like, she did a survey looking at the symptoms of, you know, that menopausal women have. And you can see there that 78% of responders, so this report she sent me the other day, indicate that menopausal symptoms interfered sometimes or often in their daily activities. Almost a third were using HRT, but women also used herbal remedies. And there's really no evidence for these herbal remedies as being useful in managing the symptoms of HRT. In postmenopausal symptomatic group, 59% of women experience 13 or more symptoms. But when you look up the literature, there's actually some women experience up to 30 symptoms associated with the menopause. The most commonly reported are hot flushes, affecting 92%, low sex drive affecting 89%, and night sweats affecting 87%. And these were Irish women that she surveyed, okay? So this is in our country. The majority, 80%, reported weight changes during the menopause, and 66% were classified as either overweight or obese, with almost half finding it difficult to manage their weight. So it is problematic. Overall, 47%, or nearly half, engage in moderate physical activity almost daily. So they're really trying their best, you know. And most people, so you can see there, 77% of women felt they lacked knowledge and are unprepared for the menopause, with social media being the main source of knowledge. And we all know about social media, what's in it. Like, you can get a snippet, but it's really difficult to know the snippets that are good from the snippets that are not so good. So what they are going to do now is actually, they've got funding to develop a structured lifestyle program specifically for women going through the menopause, looking at the best evidence available for physical activity, for nutrition and mental health. They're going to deliver it to women across multiple sites, and they're going to evaluate whether it's feasible and how it impacts on the women's symptoms. Okay, so that would be good to look forward to, you know, in the future. I suppose it'll be 2 years really before we have some results from that. So when we're looking at, I suppose, what's out there and known about the menopause at the moment, what seems to have the most evidence for it is to follow a Mediterranean type diet. And there was a really nice paper that was just published in 2020. You can see it there, Mediterranean Diet and Menopausal Health, an EMAS position statement. And EMAS is the association that looks at Menopause and Andropause Society. Okay, so it's the European Menopause and Andropause Society. So they did a review of all of the papers that were there looking at and all of the interventions that are there for menopause. And what they really say in the long term, if we keep to a Mediterranean type diet, so that's very much a Mediterranean type diet, as you know, is high in fruit and vegetables, has some low fat dairy products, has peas, beans, lentils, introduces plant proteins, reduces the amount of meat and sort of has mixed meals with plant proteins, peas, beans, pulses mixed in, that this type of diet actually has, in the long term, improves cardiovascular risk, reduces cardiovascular events and death, maintains bone mineral density, and has better body composition. Because one of the things that changes with the reduction in estrogen, people who were previously pear-shaped, okay, so they had fat on their bottom, so to speak, become apple-shaped, okay, and the fat goes here rather than there. So again, when we know that an apple shape is predisposes to cardiovascular disease. So if a Mediterranean diet can help with these body compositional changes, again, that would be really useful. The Mediterranean diet prevents cognitive decline, reduces the risk of breast cancer, and appears to reduce all-cause mortality. And they looked specifically at studies that were done in menopausal women or perimenopausal women. In the short term, the Mediterranean diet seemed to offset some of the vasomotor symptoms, okay? Not completely, but they did seem to help, okay? And it also helped control blood glucose, blood cholesterol, and blood pressure, and also seemed to help with symptoms of mood and symptoms of depression, okay, which we know are common in the mental health issues that occur associated with menopause. So from the perspective of sort of a dietary intervention and the dietary interventions that have most evidence, a Mediterranean type diet seems to be the best, okay? But a Mediterranean type diet is still very much linked in to our food pyramid that we use here, because the food pyramid that we use here, the bottom of the food pyramid has 7, you know, as well, 5 or more portions and even up to 7 portions of fruit and veg, okay? Small portions of dairy products, whole meal and whole grain products in terms of breads, rice, pasta, and then small portions of meat, poultry, fish, and eggs. There's also been some work done around plant-based diets, so completely vegan diets, and the use of whole soybeans. So this paper was, again, it was just published in 2021, so last year. But you can see there how many people had to be screened and how difficult it was for people to actually maintain a diet. So by the time, if you look at the bottom there, you can see that in each group that they looked at, there was only 17. Okay, so very small numbers of people, you know, so probably not quite adequately powered in order to really see a difference. But what they saw was that it was associated with reduced frequency and severity of hot flushes. So there does seem to be something in the sort of incorporating more plant-based foods into the diet. Frequency and severity of hot flushes, and the elimination of moderate to severe hot flushes for the majority, and quality of life improvements in vasomotor, psychosocial, physical, and sexual domains. So people felt better on a more plant-based diet. Now, they actually, for this study, used a vegan diet and supplemented with soybeans. So that's really difficult. But it's, I suppose, the key message you would take out of that probably it's helpful to increase your plant-based proteins and increase your fruit and vegetables. The Flamenco Project is a Spanish project. And again, they're trying to look at Mediterranean diet and menopausal symptoms. And what they found, which was really surprising, was that a lower consumption of poultry and skimmed dairy products was associated with more symptoms. And a higher consumption of vegetables and soya milk was associated with less symptoms, but it only helped in those with very mild symptoms. And again, by the time they got down to the groups were quite small. So sometimes you'll see snippets out there that this, you should avoid poultry. And really at the end of the day, what this study says very clearly is there's no strong evidence to support a change in diet for modifying menopausal symptoms. So really, I think you'd have to be very wary about trying to reduce poultry, for example, in trying to modify symptoms. From what I've read and from what's out there and what's available, it would appear that trying to adhere to your Mediterranean type diet, your food pyramid diet, is best for cardiovascular health, is best for bone disease, and is best for the menopausal symptoms. So really, I suppose in summary, I just want to say that beware of fake nutritionists or nutritional therapists giving false and evidence-based nutritional advice. The best diet is a diet that includes all the food groups, Mediterranean type in as much as possible, being careful not to cut out food groups, incorporating plenty of fruit and veg, plant-based meals. So again, recipes where you can mix and match, you know what I mean, and add into stews and casseroles, peas, beans and lentils, and just to have a small amount of meat. Remember breakfasts and snacks, and have healthy snacks around, and consider cooking in bulk. So again, that's very much reiterated by our own food pyramid. Trying to make goals that are smart goals, that are not impossible for us to adhere to. And then remembering that if we could keep our liver healthy and our kidneys healthy, we're like well on the way to good health. And again, I think something that I just saw, if you start taking care of your health now, you will start seeing and feeling results one day earlier than if you start tomorrow. So to try and do that, and really always when you're looking for information, to try and take the evidence-based guidelines into account, and be careful of what you see on social media, because snippets of a study can be reported and it doesn't give the whole picture. So thank you for listening, and thank people online, and it's lovely to see some faces in the audience.